For many years, people saw Elton John as a true and loyal friend who never went too far, never talked too much, and never questioned the official story about Princess Diana. He sang at her funeral, he grieved, and then he kept quiet. But as years went by, his words started to change. They came out slower, heavier, and much more open. What Elton has now shared doesn't sound like just fond memories or a nice tribute anymore. It sounds like grief that never went away, anger that hasn't finished, and a silence that led to results much darker than anyone thought. The friendship that maybe got too close. Elton John didn't come into Princess Diana's life as some faraway star or an official palace guest. Their bond started in a moment that felt surprisingly normal and human, way before the sadness of her death gave it big meaning. In the early 80s, Elton already knew royal groups, going to private parties and charity events, liked by older family members for his songs and his public style. But Diana was not the same. She didn't care much about high status or fancy rules, and Elton noticed that right away. When they met at a private party at Windsor Castle, there were no reporters, no plan, and no idea that the night would be important. But it was. Elton later remembered coming early, seeing the room nearly empty, and dancing with Diana with no one watching, no strict rules, and no holding back. That short time of laughing together and feeling free cut through the stiff ways that ruled her life. It was the start of a friendship that grew not from having the same fancy life, but from both feeling uncomfortable with being famous. Both knew what it was like to be loved by millions and still feel really lonely deep inside. Both knew how fast love from fans could turn into heavy pressure and how little control they had over what people said about them in public. As their friendship got stronger, Elton saw parts of Diana that the public never saw. She wasn't just the smiling person in newspaper photos. She was good at noticing things, very funny in a smart way, and really aware of how power worked in private. She listened more than she talked, and when she talked, it was often about issues that others stayed away from. Their connection got stronger from private talks, working on charities, and lots of time without cameras around. This closeness, though, did not go unnoticed. The royal world was never okay with outsiders who got Diana's trust too fast. Elton was accepted, sometimes praised, but always kept an eye on. As Diana's marriage fell apart and she became more independent, the people around her got more careful about who she depended on. Elton felt that pressure growing, not from direct fights, but from quietness, keeping distance, and small hints that this friendship was starting to be a problem. Looking back, Elton would later admit something upsetting. The closer he got to Diana, the more her world looked weak and easy to break. She had people around her, but she was getting more alone. The system she was part of was not made to protect someone who showed weakness, and definitely not to allow real emotional truth. Elton stayed by her side, thinking friendship was enough. But what neither of them knew was that this closeness would later put him right in the middle of things that would bother him for the rest of his life, when silence became a warning. By the early 90s, Elton John started to feel that something around Princess Diana was changing in a way he couldn't explain back then. Their talks were still warm, still close, but more and more stopped by pauses. Diana talked more carefully, thought about her words, and often switched topics when things got near talking about the palace. Elton, who had dealt with fame for years, saw the sigs. Ends of someone being controlled instead of helped. It wasn't crazy thinking. It was just trying to stay safe. Diana's work helping people had gone way past just formal charity events. Her help with AIDS awareness and her choice to touch patients in public had already gone against deep fears and made big organizations feel ashamed. Elton liked her bravery because it was like his own fight against bad views about people. Together, they thought being seen could break down fear. But every public thing Diana did came with private punishments. Invites changed. Advisors held on tighter. Trust was only given under conditions. Elton saw how Diana's group of friends got smaller. Old friends went away quietly, replaced by people who pushed carefulness instead of truth. When Elton brought up worries, Diana brushed them off, often with jokes, sometimes with sadness. She knew the price of fighting back better than anyone. The palace, in her words, did not punish with loud noise. It punished bit by bit over time. Elton later thought that this feeling in the air created a kind of loneliness and feelings that hurt more than mean words in public. Diana had people around her but was really alone inside. This time also showed Elton's own growing unease with fame. He started staying away from big public events, not feeling good in crowds or parties anymore. He saw the same tiredness in Diana. Fame had felt strong and good when they were younger, but now it felt like a cage that asked for quiet in return for safety. Elton would later say that he missed warning signs because he thought friendship could protect her. He didn't realize how big the system around her was. What bothered Elton the most was not what Diana said, but what she stopped saying. Talks cut off suddenly. Plans got put off forever. Calls were not answered for longer times. It wasn't ending the friendship, it was holding back. Diana was learning which truths were safe to tell and which ones were risky. Elton, watching up close, felt something new with the royal family. Fear, not for himself, but for someone he cared about a lot. Years later, Elton would say that this was when silence stopped feeling okay and normal. It started to feel like a warning. Not a big loud one, not said out loud, but the quiet kind that comes in slowly and doesn't leave. Back then, he didn't face it directly. He didn't fight it. He thought time would fix what pressure had messed up. That thought would become one of the regrets he could never fully get away from. The fallout that no one was supposed to see. The break between Elton John and Princess Diana did not happen with yelling or public blame. It happened quietly through choices made without reasons and messages that never arrived. By the start of that year, their friendship, once easy and natural, had gone into what Elton would later call a deep and confusing cold period. The trigger was a project meant to celebrate art and charity, but it showed something much more breakable underneath. Elton had worked with their shared friend, Gianni Versace, on a fancy coffee table book to raise money for AIDS causes. Diana had agreed to help it in private and in public. Tickets were sold. People expected things. Then suddenly, she pulled back. She said no to coming to the launch. She said no to writing the foreword, and she gave no reason that felt like it came from her personally. To Elton, it felt like official business, as if someone else made the choice and it was passed through her. The reason, he learned later, was fear. The book had pictures that put royal family members next to bold fashion photos. Diana worried it would upset older, important people, especially those already not happy with her being more free. She picked being careful over staying loyal, not because she wanted space from Elton, but because she felt the danger of results getting closer. Elton got the worry, but the quiet after it hurt more than the choice itself. When he tried to talk, the answer he got didn't sound like Diana. The tone was stiff and official. The friendliness was missing. Even how she called him was different. Elton later said that this hurt him more than any mean public words ever did. It wasn't pushing him away. It was distance given in a polite way. He started to think that Diana was being told to pull back from friends who made her life harder. And again, the punishment wasn't loud. It was just not being there. What upset Elton the most was realizing that Diana seemed more and more around people who made fear stronger instead of giving safety. He felt locked out not just as a friend, but as someone who knew her feelings well. The break lasted for months, not fixed, not talked about, and heavy. Elton kept going with the project, making sure money went to charity, but the happiness was gone. Something important had cracked. Then came the call that changed everything. When Gianni Versace was murdered, the shock broke the space between them. Diana called Elton directly. No go-betweens, no stiff ways. Grief did what pride couldn't. They talked truthfully again, admitting the hurt and mix-up that had kept them apart. The getting back together was real, but it was weak, built in sadness rather than calm. The summer that refused to make sense. The summer after was not full of big drama like news stories like. It was confusing, feelings all squeezed together, and non-stop. Elton John would later call it unreal, a series of things that happened too fast for sadness to turn into understanding. The getting back with Princess Diana after Gianni Versace's death had opened their connection again, but neither knew it was already short on time. At Versace's funeral, Elton was not the calm public person people thought he would be. He cried openly, too much loss hitting him. Diana, on the other hand, stayed strong. She held him, made him calm, and acted with a quiet power that seemed on purpose. Elton remembered thinking that if she could stay strong then, he could do it for her too. It was a quiet swap, help given without words between two people who had too much watching to show weakness in public. Just weeks later, Diana was gone. The news came in a harsh way that left no room to not believe it. Elton had trouble accepting how someone so there, so just back in touch, could disappear so fast. The shock wasn't just about dying, it was about when it happened, about talks not finished, about getting back together coming just soon enough to be lost. The world wanted public sadness, but Elton felt more like not believing it mixed with feeling bad. He wondered if quietness, his own and from others, had let too many things go without questions. When they asked him to sing at the funeral, Elton paused, not because he didn't want to honor Diana, but because he was scared of crying in front of everyone. The pressure was huge. This wasn't just singing. It was a moment the world would never forget. He changed the song first made for Marilyn Monroe, making every word fit Diana's life, her kindness, and her complicated sides. The choice wasn't liked by everyone. There were arguments in private, worries about being too emotional, and questions if a modern honor fit in that place. Elton didn't back down. He thought Diana was a link between old ways and real life, between fancy events and being human. As he sang, he just focused on getting through. Don't mess up, don't fall apart, don't let sadness take over the job. Later, he would say his heart was beating fast. His thoughts were split between memories and holding back. Millions watched, but Elton felt alone with how heavy the loss was. What surprised him most after was the song doing so well felt wrong. It went high on music lists, set new records, and became a big song for everyone's sadness. Elton felt really uneasy with that focus. He wondered if playing sadness over and over was good, if Diana would want her death turned into something people used. He decided then he would never sing that version again. It was only for that one time. As people grieved in public, Elton pulled back more. Fame didn't comfort him anymore. It just brought noise. Diana not being there left questions that no event could answer, and a feeling that something very important was still not settled. Look, when grief turned into something he couldn't ignore. In the years after Princess Diana's death, Elton John hardly talked about her in ways that sounded unfinished. In public, he honored her. But in private, the sadness grew into something heavier. What started as grieving slowly turned to thinking hard, and thinking turned to feeling uneasy. Elton would later say that time didn't make things clear. It brought questions he couldn't keep quiet anymore. Watching Prince Harry grow up made those feelings stronger. Seeing Diana's son get emotional from his singing at the funeral left a big mark on Elton. Harry would later say the song almost made him break down in public, bringing up feelings he had pushed down for years. For Elton, that was a reminder that Diana's death wasn't over and done. It was a hurt passed on, quietly affecting the lives of people she left. As years passed with memorials, Elton saw how official remembering got less deep, more just for show, less about her real self. He kept posting honors, talking about her kindness, and giving money to causes like hers. But under that was anger building. Diana had been a woman with huge pressure, around power, but left open to danger. Elton started to say carefully, on purpose, that her fear in the last years was real. She had felt watched, she had felt controlled, and she had felt not safe in ways much more than just newspaper chew. Passing, Elton never blamed straight out. He used words like not protected, alone, and not understood, but what he meant was obvious. Diana had to deal with things way bigger than her alone. Her weakness was not met with safety, but with demands. Elton's talks later had a seriousness his early honors didn't. He talked about silence as something he had to learn, not pick, about being loyal, meaning holding back, and feeling sorry for accepting rules he now wondered about. The unease grew as talk about how Diana died came back in public chats. Elton didn't support wild ideas, but he didn't push away the worry either. He admitted how fast things happened, how little time for help, and how easy it was for blame to disappear into normal steps. His quietness, once showing respect, started to feel like helping. Forget how complicated Diana really was. By the time Elton talked more freely, his way had changed. He wasn't just remembering old times. He was working through it. Fame didn't matter to him anymore. What people thought in public didn't count. What counted was being honest, even if it made people uncomfortable. His words weren't big shocks because they blamed someone. They were hard to hear because they came from a person who saw Diana without cameras, when fear was real, and when trust was hard to find. Elton's quiet ended not from anger, but from sadness. And what made it tough to listen to was the hint that Diana's story, even today, is not finished. Not because we don't know facts, but because no one fully took the blame. Do you think Elton John waited too long to speak up? Or was keeping quiet the only way to keep Diana's memory safe? Was Princess Diana let down by the people who were supposed to protect her? Or is the real story still being hidden on purpose? Tell us what you think in the comments, and remember to like, subscribe, and check the next video for more stories that history hasn't fully told.